They say every political empire collapses slowly, then all at once. But no one expected the first crack to come from inside Donald Trump's own inner circle, or for Denzel Washington to be the one who called it the beginning of the end. And yet, that's exactly what happened. 30 seconds. That's all it took for the biggest scandal of the year to ignite. It began with a leak. A quiet, unmarked folder slipped to a late-night reporter, containing allegations so explosive they could drown a campaign. 3 senior figures close to Trump were accused of predatory behavior spanning years, hush money exchanges, hidden NDAs, and secret recordings no one was ever meant to hear. Within hours, the story hit the internet like a detonation. Trump's team scrambled, denying everything, threatening lawsuits, calling it deep state sabotage. But for the first time since he stepped into politics, the panic wasn't coming from outside the walls, it was coming from inside them. The people closest to him were turning on each other, leaking messages, accusing, deflecting, terrified of being next. And then came the moment nobody saw coming. At a charity gala in downtown Atlanta, a reporter shouted a question across the red carpet. "Denzel, what do you think about the scandals inside Trump's circle?" He could have ignored it. He could have dodged. He could have kept it neutral. Instead, Denzel stopped walking. He looked straight into the camera, eyes calm, voice low, and said a single sentence that would travel across the country before he even reached his table. "This isn't a scandal, it's the beginning of the end." The ballroom froze. Reporters erupted. The clip hit Twitter, then TikTok, then every cable network within minutes. Because Denzel didn't speak like a celebrity giving commentary. He spoke like a man who had seen enough, and who knew more than he was saying. Behind closed doors, Trump's advisors were already spiraling. Someone inside the circle had flipped. Someone had the recordings. And someone wanted the whole world to know. This wasn't just political drama. It was an implosion, slow at first, now accelerating with every hour. And Denzel Washington? He had just lit the fuse. By sunrise the next morning, Washington, D.C. felt different. Tighter, charged, like the air before a storm. Newsrooms were vibrating. Congressional staffers were whispering in hallways. Trump's loyalists were suddenly avoiding cameras, eyes darting like they were being watched. Because the scandal hadn't plateaued. It had multiplied. At 6:14 a.m., a second leak dropped, this time not allegations, but audio. A man's voice, unmistakably a senior Trump advisor, saying, "We kept it quiet for years. If one of us goes down, we all go down." The clip thundered across cable news. Reporters scrambled to verify. The internet exploded again. Who leaked this? Who is we? What are they hiding? And amid the chaos, one question climbed above the rest. How did Denzel know? By noon, panelists were dissecting his 7-word prophecy like scripture. Commentators were replaying the footage frame by frame, his stillness, the weight behind his voice, the way he didn't blink. This wasn't celebrity gossip anymore. This was narrative control. This was a shift in public perception. Behind closed doors, Trump's war room was coming apart. 2 advisors reportedly screamed at each other in front of staff. One demanded immediate loyalty statements. Another accused them of falling for Denzel's trap. Phones were confiscated. No one was allowed to leave the building. Someone even suggested running polygraphs, not for the public, but for each other. Meanwhile, Denzel wasn't hiding. He was preparing. At his home in Los Angeles, he sat across from 2 people rarely seen in headlines, a former federal prosecutor and a crisis ethics strategist. Both had arrived unannounced. "You understand what you stepped into?" the prosecutor asked. Denzel nodded slowly. "This isn't Hollywood beef," the strategist added. "You challenged a political machine that survives on fear. They won't take this lightly. But Denzel wasn't shaken. He leaned back in his chair, hands steepled, eyes sharp. "I didn't predict anything," he said calmly. "I recognized a pattern. And patterns don't lie." Outside his home, reporters were already gathering. Inside Trump's circle, alliances were fracturing. Online, people were choosing sides. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. By the time evening hit, the scandal had mutated into something bigger than leaks and whispers. 3 more insiders were named in anonymous reports. Old text messages surfaced. A private flight manifest from 2018 mysteriously appeared online. Everything pointed in one direction: someone close to Trump was dumping years of secrets in real time. Cable news anchors traded nervous glances. Commentators who normally defended Trump hesitated. And through it all, Denzel's clip kept replaying like a warning bell. The beginning of the end. In a Manhattan studio, a viral TikTok creator paused mid-recording and said, "Denzel didn't predict the fall, he announced it." The comment hit 1 million views in under an hour. Meanwhile, inside Trump Tower, the mood shifted from panic to paranoia. Aides whispered behind closed doors. Lawyers paced hallways with folders pressed against their chests. One staffer reportedly walked out in tears after being accused of leaking audio he'd never even heard. At 8:23 p.m., another shockwave hit. A source inside the FBI confirmed they had opened a preliminary inquiry into the predatory allegations tied to Trump's advisors. It wasn't a raid. It wasn't an indictment. But it was enough to signal that something serious, something federal, was moving. Trump's spokesperson rushed to cameras. This entire narrative was triggered by a Hollywood actor chasing attention. But that line didn't land. People had rewatched the clip. They had felt the calm in Denzel's voice. There was no performance there. And at that exact moment, thousands of miles away in Los Angeles, Denzel sat quietly in his study, reviewing a stack of documents someone had delivered anonymously that afternoon. Photos. Emails. Dates. Names. He closed the folder slowly, exhaled, and whispered to himself. "It's worse than they think." Outside, camera crews gathered like vultures. Inside, Denzel's phone buzzed, a single message from an unknown number. "You were right. It has begun." The next morning, Washington woke up to a political earthquake. 3 major newspapers, all rivals, released simultaneous front-page stories confirming that the scandal inside Trump's circle was not only real, but deeply coordinated. The reports described a pattern of predatory behavior, shielded by loyalists who had spent years burying evidence. The headlines hit like artillery. But the real explosion came from the reaction inside the White House. According to a staffer who later spoke off record, Trump erupted into a rage the moment he saw Denzel's name trending. "Why is an actor driving this story?" he shouted. "Why is he controlling the narrative?" No one answered. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Denzel wasn't celebrating. He was pacing his living room, reviewing the anonymous documents again. There were missing pages. Redacted names. Broken timelines. Whoever sent them wanted him to see the shape of the truth, not the whole thing. At 9:40 a.m., his phone buzzed. Not a reporter. Not a fan. A sitting senator. "Denzel," the senator said, voice low, "whatever you have, whatever you know, don't say another word publicly until we talk." Denzel frowned. "Why?" "Because this is no longer a scandal," the senator whispered. "It's a security threat." Across the country, commentators were dissecting every frame of Denzel's original statement. Some praised his clarity. Others claimed he had insider intel. A few conspiracy channels even speculated he was working with federal agencies. But the truth was simpler, and far more dangerous. Denzel understood patterns of power. He recognized rot when he saw it. And the public was starting to realize something. Every time a new piece of evidence dropped, it aligned perfectly with the timeline implied by Denzel's warning. By noon, protesters gathered outside Trump Tower. By 3, DOJ officials were seen entering a federal courthouse. By 5, the hashtag end of the circle hit #1 nationwide. That evening, while the world spiraled, Denzel stood alone on his balcony, staring at the city lights. He wasn't afraid, but he could feel it in his bones. The real story hadn't broken yet. And when it did, the country wouldn't be ready. By nightfall, America was vibrating with a strange tension, the kind that comes before a truth no one wants but everyone feels coming. News networks began running emergency panels. Former White House officials were suddenly unavailable for comment. And Trump's team, usually loud and confident, went silent. That silence terrified people more than the scandal itself. At 7:12 p.m., the first televised debate about Denzel's involvement aired. A conservative host scoffed. Since when does Denzel Washington get to declare the fall of an administration? But the liberal guest fired back instantly. Since the administration lost control of its own house. Clips of that exchange racked up millions of views in hours. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit D.C. garage, the kind reserved for whistleblowers and bad memories, a frightened junior aide met with 2 investigative journalists. Hands shaking, he whispered. "They're not worried about the allegations. They're worried about who has the recordings." The journalists leaned in. "Recordings of what?" He swallowed hard. "You need to understand, what you've seen so far is nothing. There are tapes. Hours of them. And if they surface, the whole circle burns." The reporters exchanged looks. "Who has them?" The aide hesitated, then said the last thing anyone expected. "It's not who, it's which one." Back in Los Angeles, Denzel sat in front of his TV, watching the country spiral. But he wasn't focused on the chatter. His attention stayed on a single folder lying open on his coffee table, the one with the missing pages. A name was blacked out. But the pattern, the dates, the events. He knew exactly who it was. Just then, his phone rang again, same unknown number as before. When he answered, the voice on the other end was calm, almost serene. "Denzel, you were right. It is the beginning of the end. And tomorrow, the first recording drops." Denzel closed his eyes, exhaled, and whispered to himself. "God help them. Because once audio hits the public, there's no spin left. No strategy. No protection. Only truth." And this truth was going to hit like a wrecking ball. The next morning didn't begin with sunlight. It began with a notification sound, millions of phones buzzing at once. At 6:03 a.m., the first recording hit the internet. No watermark. No timestamp. Just a grainy audio file titled circle_1.mp3. The voice was unmistakable. A senior member of Trump's inner circle, laughing as he discussed, covering up behavior that would nuke the campaign if the public ever heard it. The tone was casual, like talking about weather, not crimes. Then came the sentence that made the country stop. "Don't worry. Trump never fires predators, he protects them." Cable news cut live immediately. Hosts stared at cameras like they'd swallowed ice. Producers scrambled. Politicians went silent. This wasn't allegation anymore. This was proof, raw, unfiltered, and impossible to deny. Inside the White House, chaos erupted. Phones rang non-stop. Staffers shouted down corridors. One advisor reportedly collapsed after hearing the clip. And in the middle of it all, Trump demanded, "Find the leak. I want a name before noon." But there was no name. Only one chilling realization spreading across DC. If this was circle_1, there were more. Back in Los Angeles, Denzel watched the replay on every channel. He didn't smile. He didn't flinch. He simply whispered. It started. At 9:18 a.m., a journalist cornered him outside a studio. Denzel, did you know about these recordings? Is that why you said it was the beginning of the end? Denzel paused, eyes steady. I knew the truth was coming, he said. And truth doesn't ask permission. The clip went viral instantly. By noon, Capitol Police increased security. By 1:30, 3 senators called for an emergency ethics review. By 2 p.m., the hashtag Predator Circle overtook every platform. But the most frightening moment came at 4:47 p.m., when a second file appeared online, this time with multiple voices. Men arguing. Papers shuffling. Someone saying, if even one recording leaks, we're finished. And another whispering, then pray he doesn't go to Denzel. That line alone broke the internet. Because suddenly, everyone understood. The recordings weren't just exposing the circle. They feared Denzel. And fear always means one thing. There's more truth coming. By evening, the nation wasn't just outraged, it was obsessed. Every news station ran countdown graphics. Social media refreshed every second, waiting for the next file. Streets outside federal buildings filled with protesters holding signs that read, "Who's protecting who?" and "Release everything." But inside Trump's circle, fear turned into desperation. At 7:01 p.m., a third recording dropped. This time, the voices were louder, agitated, and painfully clear. If the public hears what he did in 2016, we're done. A second voice responded. Then bury it deeper. Or bury him. Those last 2 words froze the country. For the first time, Americans heard panic, not confidence, from Trump's closest men. It wasn't just misconduct anymore. It was conspiracy, coercion, and something darker blooming underneath. In Los Angeles, Denzel sat in a private room of a studio, preparing for an interview he hadn't actually agreed to. His publicist whispered urgently. Denzel, you need to say something. People think you're involved. Some think you're the leak. He shook his head slowly. I'm not the leak. I'm the mirror. Across the country, that quote exploded within minutes. Meanwhile, back in D.C., the FBI's inquiry escalated into a formal federal investigation. Agents were seen entering campaign offices. Black SUVs circled Trump Tower. Staffers huddled in bathrooms to cry, not because of guilt, but terror. Then, at 9:42 p.m., something happened that no one expected. A source from inside Trump's legal team contacted a major cable network anonymously. Someone inside the circle is trying to contact Denzel directly. The anchor's jaw dropped. What for? The source didn't hesitate. To negotiate. Within minutes, every network broke into coverage. Analysts speculated wildly. Was this whistleblowing? A confession? A warning? At the same time, Denzel's phone lit up. Unknown number. Same pattern as before. He answered. A trembling voice whispered. They think you have more than you do. They think you're the reason the circle is collapsing. Denzel stayed silent. Then the caller said the part that chilled him. The next recording isn't about them, it's about Trump himself. A long pause. A shaky breath. Then. And once it drops, there's no turning back. Denzel closed his eyes. He understood. America was about to cross a line it could never uncross. The next morning, the world braced itself. News networks didn't run commercials. Social platforms froze timelines, waiting. Even Congress delayed hearings. Everyone felt it, the shift in the air, the quiet before a national fracture. At 10 a.m. sharp, the fourth recording dropped. This one wasn't angry or chaotic. It was calm. Controlled. Too controlled. Trump's voice filled the speakers, unmistakable, steady. If one of them goes down, we deny everything. If victims talk, we crush them publicly. And if this ever reaches the press, we call it a witch hunt. It always works. The country stopped. No noise. No spin. Just shock. Then the second part of the recording hit, the part that turned outrage into something deeper, colder. Predators stay loyal. That's why we protect them. The scream inside newsrooms was silent, but you could feel it. Anchors scrambled, lawyers argued off camera, producers covered their mouths. Within minutes, the Department of Justice announced a full criminal review. Outside Trump Tower, protesters swelled from hundreds to thousands. Some shouted. Some cried. Some stood in stunned quiet, holding signs that read, "Protect victims, not predators. No more lies." Denzel was right. And in California, Denzel watched the clip in a darkened editing suite. He didn't react. Didn't blink. His assistant whispered, "This is bigger than we thought." Denzel replied calmly, "It always is. Power hides its rot well, until it can't." Just then, his phone buzzed again, the same unknown number. This time the message wasn't a warning. It was a threat. "Stop talking. Or you're next." His assistant gasped. "Should we call security?" But Denzel shook his head slowly, eyes fixed forward. "They're panicking," he said. And panic always exposes the truth. Across the country, Americans weren't just questioning Trump's inner circle anymore. They were questioning how long this had been happening, and how many people had stayed silent. The beginning of the end wasn't coming. It had arrived. By late afternoon, the country felt like it was vibrating under its own weight. The fourth recording had cracked something open, but what happened next shattered the rest of the foundation. A fifth file appeared online without warning, no title this time, just a timestamp. When people pressed play, the room tone alone was enough to raise goosebumps. Paper rustling. A door closing. Heavy breathing. Then a quiet voice said, "We can't protect this forever. Someone's already talking." Another replied sharply, "Then find them before he does." No names. No context. But one detail sent a shock through every newsroom: the voice warning them wasn't Trump's inner circle. It belonged to a federal employee. That meant one thing. The government knew. And they'd been trying to contain the fallout long before the public ever heard a word. In Los Angeles, Denzel stood at his kitchen counter listening to the recording on a loop. Not for drama, for details. The breathing. The echo. The hesitation. Someone in that room had been scared, not powerful. His phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't the unknown number. It was the senator who'd warned him days earlier. "Denzel, you need to come to D.C., the senator said. Tonight. This is no longer a political scandal. It's a national liability." Denzel didn't argue. Didn't ask for clarification. He simply said, "Send the address." Across the country, talking heads screamed for answers. Some accused whistleblowers of treason. Others demanded Trump resign immediately. And a growing chorus insisted Denzel be placed under protection. But the real twist came at 6:48 p.m. A journalist posted a blurry photo taken inside a federal building. Two men in suits rushing down a hallway. Carrying a laptop. The caption read, Officials preparing to release recording number 6 themselves. The government wasn't reacting anymore. They were stepping in. And the moment that happened, the question shifted from who leaked this to what are they afraid of? Denzel grabbed his coat. Whatever was coming next. The entire nation would hear it. By the time Denzel's plane touched down in Washington, the city looked like a fortress. Police barricades lined the streets. News vans clogged intersections. Protesters filled the sidewalks chanting in waves that echoed off federal buildings. America wasn't watching history, it was standing inside of it. At 9:12 p.m., officials confirmed what everyone feared. Recording number 6 would be released by the government itself. No leaks. No mysteries. No anonymous uploads. This time, the truth was coming straight through the front door. Denzel stepped out of a black SUV and was escorted into a secure conference room inside a federal annex. Senators, investigators, and staffers filled the space, their faces drawn tight with exhaustion and disbelief. A large monitor glowed blue at the front of the room. A senior investigator turned to him. "Mr. Washington, you should hear this with us." The file opened. At first, only silence, the heavy kind that makes your pulse louder. Then a single voice spoke. "We can't let Trump hear this part. If he does, he'll burn everything down trying to save himself." Another voice answered sharply. "Then we let the public decide. This isn't politics anymore, it's protection." The room froze. These weren't Trump's men. These weren't whistleblowers. These were government officials discussing how to contain the president himself. Then came the final blow, a third voice, calmer, older. "If this gets out, his circle collapses. And he collapses with them. We just need one credible voice to say what we can't." A long pause. Shuffling papers. A quiet breath. And then someone like Denzel Washington. The room snapped into silence. Every senator turned. Every staffer stared. Denzel leaned back slowly, absorbing the weight of the moment. They hadn't feared him because he knew something. They had chosen him because the nation trusted him more than it trusted its own institutions. Outside, reporters screamed questions into cameras. Inside, Denzel spoke the final words of the night. "I didn't plan this. I didn't want this. But if my voice is the one thing they can't bury, then I won't run from it." A senator whispered. "Then this really is the beginning of the end." Denzel nodded. "No," he said quietly. "It's the beginning of the truth."